Hello, welcome back, welcome back, welcome back to science. So today we're going to be talking about macromolecules. Now there's four macromolecules. There's carbohydrates, lipids, proteins, and nucleic acids. Today we are focusing on the lipids. Now lipids is going to have the similar characteristic as we've looked at with carbohydrates. So the main function that we're going to see here is that lipids are going to be this backup energy source. So let's go ahead and take a look at the chemical composition. So while doing this, you'll be completing a note page that's going to look a lot like this. And structures that are going to be associated with this are going to look a lot like this. These long hydrocarbon chains. So the chemical composition for the lipids, three chemicals: carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen, and only those three chemicals. Just like carbohydrates. However, the difference is that carbohydrates are in a 1 to 2 to 1 ratio. Lipids do not have a ratio. You can see this example of here, this triglyceride. You can see a long. So it's carbon, 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 carbon. You can see just this successive, like C18H 22O2 or so. This is it's called a hydrocarbon chain. And you can see why it's called a hydrocarbon chain. It's literally just hydrogen and carbon. And at the very end, we're going to have some oxygen involved. So you can see this mix up here, not mix up, but this mixture here as C57H110O6. You don't need to remember that. It's just kind of falling true to those characteristics of what the chemical composition is. Lipids are hydrophobic. That means they are water-fearing, meaning that they don't mix well with water. So you may ask, like, what is the function for this lipid? The function is going to be for long-term energy storage. And you can see this big guy here. This blubber, this material, that is for being able to survive whenever there is low or no food. And so they can survive long periods of time, as well as being able to feed their young if it's a female. But it's backup energy storage. Whenever we diet, we're trying to get rid of this backup energy storage. So one of the first things we do is reduce the primary energy storage. We remove the primary energy, like carbohydrates, or reduce that, and then our body goes to that backup energy source like lipids and starts to burn those lipids. So the main function here, so we have the element, we have the chemical composition, which we've covered, we have the elements that are there, and we have the function. So let's go ahead and get to some of the composition of things that are involved. So for the function, there are biological molecules. There's three different functions we're going to have here. So one is going to be for long-term energy storage, that backup energy use. We're going to have biological membranes. And so like the phospholipid bilayer, this lipid portion of the phospholipid bilayer is going to have this hydrocarbon chain. All right, another function is it's going to be used as a chemical messenger in things like steroids and cholesterol. So our body is going to use these steroids that's going to go through the cell membrane and all the way to the DNA, where it's going to go through that process of reading and developing that message. All right, so now we're to this section of the notes where we're going to be writing in our overall purpose. So this is number 1A. So saturated fats. Saturated fats are going to be solid at room temperature. Saturated, solid. And you can see this is a saturated hydrocarbon here. So that's carbons with hydrogen. Notice there are no double bonds. If there's a double bond, that would be an unsaturated. But since this is completely filled, this is going to be a solid at room temperature. So every carbon is going to be occupied with as many hydrogen as possible. Excuse me. Examples include butter, lard, fat. I mentioned butter twice, so apparently it's pretty important when I was writing this. And notice that they are single bonded, as we looked at single, double, triple bonds recently. Okay, as we look at the structure of, dance back and forth a little bit. Unsaturated fats. Unsaturated fats are going to be liquid at room temperature. Notice that this is a saturated fat. Notice this is unsaturated. Notice why it's unsaturated. It's going to have a double bond right there. Anything that has a double bond, it doesn't have a hydrogen here or here because it doesn't need to. However, because of this kink in this line, it's going to be a liquid at room temperature. So you may think of what are liquids at room temperature? Are oils. So the double bond is going to occur in a hydrocarbon chain. So we have that double bond, and this is an unsaturated fat. Now, some fats are going to be polyunsaturated. Polyunsaturated are going to have many different places where we have double bonds. So once again, they're liquid at room temperature, multiple double bonds. And examples of where we see this is nuts, fish. Those are both going to have those multiple double bonds as we are polyunsaturated. So that is covering box number 1. So box number 1 is an overview of fatty acids. We've had 3 types. We've had saturated, unsaturated, and polyunsaturated. Saturated is going to have complete hydrocarbon saturation. We're going to have unsaturated with 1 double bond, making it a liquid, so it's going to be an oil instead of a solid. And then we're going to have polyunsaturated, also an oil, and we can see those as well. All right, number 2, wax. Yes, unfortunately, earwax is going to be on the page, but earwax. It has a really valuable purpose, and that is to keep microbes from entering. So your earwax is pretty uninviting for microbes, or else we would have infections in our ear all the time. So here's a little stuffed animal for earwax. Kind of silly that these exist, but some people get it. And if you're really into earwax and you want to have your own, it's giantmicrobes.com. It looks like you could buy those as well. That's not part of my swag. So the purpose of wax, there's one that's going to be something like earwax. We make it. There's also waxy coating that can be on things like leaves that we can see, and especially in tropical regions. If you see the sea spray or mist on these leaves, oftentimes they beat up. And this waxy coating is going to be used to prevent water loss. The third type is going to be something like beeswax. And it's going to be used for essentially homes for brooding bees, as well as storing energy for the queen, like we have in this honey that's here. All right, so that covers waxes. So fats, waxes. So number 2, we looked at waxes. So we had earwax, we had the waxy coatings that are in plants, and we also see things like beeswax here. And thirdly, we're going to talk about steroids. So steroids, that picture is in the perfect place. You may think it's me flexing there, but it's not. It's Arnold back whenever he was Mr. Universe. Okay, so anabolic steroids are going to be steroids that build you up. And we have a certain amount of anabolic steroids that are just naturally in our system. However, people use them as means to try to cheat the system, and it is not a healthy choice. And so we're not really going to talk about those choices a lot, but it's going to enhance the effects of testosterone. So sex hormones like testosterone, estrogen, progesterone, these are all steroid hormones. And you may think like, well, not all people are really looking like Arnold there. That's right. That took a lot of work. And if you're using steroids, it's still going to take a lot of work. You can look at another type of steroid like cortisone. And this is going to be used to treat things like inflammation as well as arthritis. But these are also a naturally occurring system, and also something that has been synthetically derived to help treat illness. Cholesterol is also part of the cell membrane. Inside of that, we have low-density lipoproteins and high-density lipoproteins. You may have heard these as LDLs and HDLs, but this is a type of cholesterol. So 3 types of steroids that we look at here, because we've looked at we have anabolic steroids, sex steroids, sex hormones, including those steroid types. We have cortisone as well as cholesterol. Now, if we look at an overview of lipids, we have fats, oils, waxes, cholesterol, steroids. So you should be able to see lipids and think fats, oils, waxes, cholesterol, steroids. Chemical composition, carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. Is there a ratio? No. The main function, backup energy source. All right, guys, I will look forward to seeing you soon.